We bought a 3.38 acre property in an area of the county known as Indian Valley on October 22nd, 1999. The property consisted of 3 buildings, a farmhouse, a barn, and a cottage. There was a pond, or what we thought was a pond, that was very overgrown, and a very large field. All of the buildings were in total disrepair. The septic system had failed, and the previous owner, George Washburn, had been piping the sewage waste from the farmhouse into the pond. The property had a failed septic system. In order to develop, we had to hook up to the sewer system. The Novato Sanitary District is a separate district from the city of Novato. We had met with the head of the Novato Sanitary District and the director of the organization that deals with boundaries, which is called LAFCO, before buying the property. Both had told us that there were no issues with annexing to the Novato Sanitary District. Unfortunately, after we bought the property, 2 local politicians got involved, Marin County Supervisor Cynthia Murray and Novato City Council member Pat Eklund. Together they started fighting our annexation to the Novato City Council based on a law passed in 1997 called the Urban Growth Boundary, which limited growth of the city of Novato. As the law stood, we could annex to the Novato Sanitary District without annexing to the city of Novato. Hence, we are not increasing the size of the city of Novato. There is a state law that requires properties to hook up to the sewer if within 411 feet of sewer pipes, and the sewer pipes ran right in front of our house. Murray and Eklund did their work and got LAFCO to refuse to annex us to the Novato Sanitary District until we annexed to the city of Novato. June 27, 2000, the Novato City Council approved what was called the Locke Hodge Ordinance, named after myself and my husband James Hodge. This ordinance forced us to annex to the city of Novato. It also rezoned us limited agricultural and required us to agree to a drainage maintenance agreement. We were the only property that the city council put such restrictions on and forced to annex. The drainage maintenance agreement required us to provide a stream protection plan and to carry $1 million of liability insurance that held the city of Novato harmless for any damage caused by their stormwater dumping onto our property. We fought this agreement. We hired a lawyer. We tried to make changes, but the city was very nasty about it. When we initially bought the property, we naively thought the pond was a natural spring-fed pond. We didn't know that the pond was filled by stormwater. We also didn't know that the previous owner had put in a drainage pipe to carry the water off the property. The rounded shape of the pond was actually caused by erosion from the storm water because the previous owner's drainage pipes were eroding and the water wasn't flowing through them. We began to discover that this was not a pond at all, but instead what is called ponding from the water that isn't draining. It wasn't until July 2000 that there was no water in the pond and we saw that it was a big hole. This was after the annexation process. Over the years of global warming, the pond remained empty of water for up to 8 months a year. Every year when it would rain hard, then the pond would overflow and flood our property. There were years when our driveway was flooded. The city of Novato could not have known that the previous owners drained pipes because we only discovered them when there wasn't water in the pond. If the city of Novato's engineers had done their work when approving the Marin Headland subdivision that surrounds our house, then they would have known that the storm water was going to flood our property. Over time, sinkholes began forming along the area above the drainage pipes the previous owner had put in due to erosion. By 2017, we were noticing sinkholes all over the front property. We talked to an engineer who told us that water was probably seeping underground. By 2019, we started having large trees fall over. When the storm water enters the property from the 36-inch pipe at the street, it dug a very deep ditch, and this ditch, or the water, was digging underneath the root balls of the trees, which made them fall over. In March of 2019, a large cedar tree fell over, and when this huge cedar fell over, it took out our entire irrigation system in this area. We started having large sinkholes develop along our driveway from the entrance gate for about 50 feet. This caused our driveway to sink on the south side, creating a significant slope. It also caused all the sensors embedded in our driveway for our automatic gate to break, and this became costly yearly expense to have them repaired. From 2018 to 2020, we lost a lot of fencing due to either trees falling over or when the pond flooded, it created a river of mud. The weight of this mud pushed the fencing over. It became obvious that we were going to lose all of the tall trees in the front area due to the storm water. So in November 2019, we decided to install a 36-inch pipe in the area that the stormwater had created this big ditch. So that was the same size pipe that was coming from the city. We also built a catch basin in hopes of catching some of the debris that washes in from the city. We put in a new 24-inch pipe that ran 80 feet to replace the previous owner's pipe. We built retaining walls on either sides of these pipes to help erosion. In February of 2020, we had to replace our entire driveway. This involved some grading and bringing in dirt so that the driveway would be level. One of the sinkholes along our driveway compromised existing drainage pipes that goes under the driveway, so we had to replace that. We had to bring in rock for the drainage ditches that were created. And finally, we had to completely re-landscape the entire front yard. I was red tagged by the City of Novato on February 12, 2020 for grading around the pond area, replacing drain pipes, and partially filling the pond. I spent nearly a year providing documents required by the city's engineering department, including a drainage plan with detailed map, planting plan. I had to hire ILS Associates, a civil engineering company, to prepare a report for the city on drainage analysis and stormwater calculations for a 25-year event. We had to assess whether the drain pipes that we just put in could handle the city's stormwater volume through my property. In June, I appeared before the Marin Water Board, and of all the entities that are part of that board, only Fish and Wildlife and Water Resources Control were interested in my project. Both of these two organizations deemed my project an emergency. The sinkholes were so bad in our driveway we couldn't even get to our house. Fish and Wildlife acknowledged that my project did not destroy a natural habitat, as asserted by the City of Novato's Planning Commission a year later in 2021. I finally received a grading permit toward the end of July of 2020. After all this effort and tens of thousands of dollars, while I was red tagged for drainage issues, my driveway replacement did not require a permit. In October 2020, in an attempt to recoup the excessive property maintenance expenses and for the unfair treatment, unnecessary request, and bullying over the years from the City of Novato, I hired a real estate attorney, David Winton, to initiate a lawsuit against the City of Novato, contending, one, the size of the drainage pipe I had to put in was in excess of what any homeowner should be responsible for, and two, the City of Novato did nothing to measure the volume of stormwater coming through the pipe and flowing onto a private residence. From 2018 to 2020, I had several engineers come to my property, and they concluded that on the days when we got excessive amounts of rain, that the stormwater volume was as much as 90,000 gallons per day, and thus was way too much for my property to handle. Today, after spending nearly $500,000 to combat the stormwater flow, including the additional 36-inch pipes to match those from the street, my property continues to flood. There continues to be erosion problems requiring major amounts of money. In January of 2022, I applied for an SB 9 lot split. Approved by Governor Gavin Newsom in the fall of 2021, SB 9 is a state law enabling a lot split to be completed with simple paperwork. It does not require the approval of a city council. My interest in filing for an SB 9 lot split was to care for my sick husband, who required full-time attention. I planned on making the existing farmhouse into a legal rental for a caregiver. Incredibly, the City of Novato's Planning Department rejected my SB 9 application. In order to appeal this decision, I had to hire the attorney Elizabeth Breckus. Before the televised Zoom meeting commission on May 5, 2022, Commissioner Peter Tiernan came out to my property unannounced for a tour. I was nervous about letting him on the property without legal representation. When I refused to allow Mr. Tiernan onto the property, he threatened me in such a way that I was shaking and I had to threaten to call the police. During the Planning Commission meeting, not only did they threaten to reject my grading permit I had paid for, but to reject all my building permits that they had ever issued. They alluded that I would need to tear down my house, and they said that I had destroyed a wildlife sanctuary. I was shocked at what took place. When that meeting ended, I fainted at my computer in my office. I struggled just to walk to my house and was a wreck as I had to care for my sick husband. In response to the remarkable bullying and threats, I had no choice but to hire experts to prove that I had not destroyed a wildlife habitat. I had to pay for experts to show how much stormwater was coming onto my property from the Marin Highlands development. Altogether, I spent over $100,000. At the January 2023 mediation, the only thing that was decided was that I could have the SB9 permit and that they would not revoke any of my building permits. Still to this day, the city has not formally documented these agreements. They remain up in the air, and I remain in fear of further bullying, threats, and false claims against me. This last section is a review of the reports the Planning Commission demanded. The first one by Geomorph states that the work was completed meeting engineering design standards and legal environmental requirements. The second two confirm that the pond dried up in the last 20 years, that the landowner did the necessary work so stormwater could drain more efficiently, and the area is not suitable for California red-legged frogs and northern western pond turtles, which are the only two potentially endangered creatures. James Riley was hired, and we did a discussion with him via Zoom, and he provided a bunch of attachments and documents. The first is his rainwater reports that show that though there was not consistent yearly increase in rainwater, the reports do show the months that when water was excessive that correspond to the months that we had flooding. So James Riley also explained that engineers would not have put gauges in the stormwater pipes to measure the amounts of water. Instead, they would have used the following calculation based on elevation and slope of the hill above my house, where they take a section of the hill where the stormwater is coming from. In my case, it is the hill above my house where the Marin Highlands subdivision is located. According to James, they take about a third of the height and a quarter of the overall width and calculate quantity of stormwater dumping onto my property. If this theory is correct, then there are only about 136 homes of which their stormwater drains onto my property instead of the 450 homes that I calculated. To prove this theory is incorrect, I took ping pong balls and I went around to all the storm drains in the subdivision above James Riley's area for calculation, and I put ping pong balls in all the storm drains. I also labeled all of them. I had a total of 4 ping pong balls that made it down the hill onto my property, all of which were from the streets above James's elevation limitation. I'm wondering, way back when, the city of Novato allowed the development of the subdivision around my property to dump the stormwater onto the property if they use the same elevation calculation. If this is true, then according to their calculations, there should be less water than there actually is. The city of Novato refused to release any of the requested documentation for the mediation.